my kids were born with an iPad in their hand, good, bad, or indifferent. Like, they just were. So they are used to that, and that's what they're looking for in their job that they're gonna spend 8+ hours a day at. So if I'm a company that looks like I invest in AI and I can use that as a talking point and I can get out to career fairs and say, "Hey, we've got 5 AI projects going right now," that's a company that's gonna attract those workers.
Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm your host, Ellen Wood. AI is rapidly transforming manufacturing by enhancing efficiency, reducing costs, and addressing labor shortages. Recent stats indicate over 80% of businesses have adopted AI to some extent, with 35% implementing it across multiple departments. But one area that's still working to catch up is industrial operations. From predictive maintenance to automating repetitive tasks, the industrial manufacturing sector is rapidly finding ways to incorporate these advanced capabilities. Joining me today to dig into some of the details is Bryan DeBois, Director of Industrial AI at RoviSys. Welcome, Bryan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So, before we get into our discussion today about AI, let's take a moment just to get to know each other a little bit better. This is a feature that a lot of our listeners are probably not used to. It used to only be available in our video content, but now that video is available on Spotify, we're putting it into the full program. So, our icebreaker question for today, I've got one for you, and then you've got a different one for me. So, mine for you, what's a weird fact about you?
So I would say I live a pretty normal suburban life, but I would say the one weird fact is that my wife and I are kind of roller coaster freaks. And so we both have each ridden, I would say, at least over 100 rides on roller coasters, probably 150 at this point. When we met at 18 in college, and both kind of bonded over roller coasters. We live in Ohio, and so we've got Cedar Point is up the street from us, so that's, that's kind of why. But and then when we raised our kids, we kinda raised them to be roller coaster freaks, so they ride with us now, so all 5 of us jump on these coasters. But yeah, we love them big and fast and scary, so
My kids also love roller coasters, and my husband is a roller coaster freak. We've been to Cedar Point multiple times. There's one roller coaster there. I forget which one it is. It's the ginormous one that's so tall that you can see Canada on a clear day.
yep, that's the
Um,
Millennium Force.
Millennium Force. I remember I love riding that roller coaster, but I read something recently about it that was really interesting, and that is that it is one of the few roller coasters in the world that can help break up a person's kidney stones. Totally random. If you have kidney stones, you can ride that roller coaster and it will help break them up so that you can pass them. I don't know.
I don't know how
But
accurate that is, but, I guess as I age, that's good to know.
if it's true, that speaks to the force of that roller
Oh,
coaster.
yeah.
It is
That
a
first
ride.
hill is wild. It's wild. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about roller coasters just this past weekend with my son. We were driving through Louisville
Mhm.
and looking over and seeing when Kentucky Kingdom was going to open because it's just off I-65 in Louisville. You can see it right by the fairgrounds, and he's very excited. He's like, when is it gonna open? Can we go ride roller
Yep,
coasters?"
yep. Yeah, I can't wait. We got our season passes. I can't wait for Cedar Point to open. We'll be there, so.
All right, that sounds like a lot of fun for the summer. So you had a different question for me, to get to know me a little bit better for our listeners, and what was that?
I did. So Ellen, I like to cook a lot. I do all the cooking in our house, so I'm always looking for new ideas, new inspiration. What's your favorite dish to cook?
Ooh, my favorite or the one I cook the most often? Because that's a different thing
That's a
altogether.
good question. I would say, what's your favorite?
My favorite. So I love making, soup, and yeah, I make soup all the time, and I've worked this past winter and fall at perfecting my bone broth,
Okay,
and
yep.
I've been making multiple batches of it, and I make bone broth at least once a week, and I freeze it, I give it away to friends, but I've wanted to find, like, the best bone broth, and, I like beef bone broth, and I have a grocery store near us, it's an international grocery, and it has a lot of different, ethnic items that most grocery stores do not have, and this store has all the parts that you need for making good broth that most grocery stores aren't gonna have prepackaged nicely for someone to go consume. And one of the biggest additions to my chicken broth
Mhm.
is the feet. The
Oh,
chicken
okay. Okay. Okay.
you c you get so much more collagen out of chicken feet, and it's not something you will ever find in a regular grocery store,
Right.
but if you can get your hands on them from a butcher and add them into your bones and your vegetables and your herbals that you put in there, the chicken feet make all the difference in a very,
Awesome.
very collagen-rich broth.
Which is what you want. Yeah, well, that's
Yes.
a good tip. I like that. I'll have to look
It
into that.
it makes my kids laugh every time I make it because there's these little chicken feet sticking up
Oh,
out of the pot.
well, as long as it tastes good in the end, like
Exactly, it hasn't stopped them from eating it,
that's
so
right. That's right.
alright, well, let's get on to our topic today, which is not chicken feet or roller coasters, it is AI in industrial manufacturing, and this is something that you have a passion for, so tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, to get there, I kinda have to start back, at my journey here, my career at RoviSys. So, I work for a company, so we're a system integrator, and we target manufacturing and industrial customers. So, I started here actually right out of college. I co-opted here, and then I started full time. So, I've actually spent 25 years here at RoviSys. I spent my whole professional career, which you don't see as often anymore, folks spending kind of their whole career, at a single company. And I came in at with a software background. And so at the beginning of my career, we were writing a lot of custom software and things like that for customers. Now things have progressed. There's a lot of commercial off the shelf software that you can buy. So in some ways we've kind of advanced, and now so we're focused on AI for those same industrial and manufacturing customers. I'm very passionate about it because I really came into this industry knowing nothing about manufacturing when I started 25 years ago. I knew I liked the show How It's Made, so that was kind of cool, like to seeing how stuff was made. And so now I've spent the last 2.5 decades working in this industry and really have fallen in love with manufacturing. I do feel like manufacturing is the biggest lever that we can pull as a civilization to create the most prosperity for the most people. I think it's that important. I think it is the wealth generation mechanism for civilization, for society, certainly for economies. And so I'm passionate about what we do. And manufacturers in general are not known for being real cutting edge, right? For a lot of good reasons, they're very risk averse. And so they're typically 5 to 7 years behind more of the IT world and in the rest of the world, other industries. And so it's been, a longer process to get them to adopt AI. But almost all of my customers now are taking some kind of steps towards that. Even if they haven't gone full born AI yet, they've got a data science team where they're at least starting to build out some of the infrastructure, do some of the infrastructure upgrades that are required to get to an AI future.
Alright, so once that initial AI project gets off the ground, how can organizations effectively scale that up and make it into those bigger projects that don't necessarily overwhelm the team? As you said, they're risk averse, they're not this isn't their wheelhouse. This isn't where they look for the next thing, and this is very new. So how do we do it without overwhelming those teams or risking the quality of that implementation and trying to do something? We certainly don't wanna do something and fail because then, it's going to make the team risk averse to trying something new again.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I know it sounds self-serving, but the answer really is to hire a system integrator. So that's really our role is to in cases where the customer doesn't have any internal capability like that, any internal team, we're there to bring in the experts and to be the horsepower behind those types of projects. But when we also have plenty of customers that have existing, data science or AI teams, and then we come in to scale their capabilities out. So, it's like, look, we want to, we've heard this where we've got some models built and we think we were onto something here, but we want to roll this out to 5 sites. So we've got a 3-year plan to roll this out to 5 sites. I'm like, wait, I can scale horizontally. I can bring in bodies and we can roll it out to 5 sites in parallel. And so that suddenly is an eye opener there when they realize we could shrink this schedule a heck of a lot more. So, like I said, I know it sounds self-serving, but that really is the role that system integrators play in these types of things, is to augment that capability. I will say longer term though, one of our key tenants at RoviSys is that um, we believe that customers should own the solution when we're done. So
Mhm.
we spend a lot of time on training. We tell customers you're allowed to look over our shoulder the entire project if you'd like. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable owning this system when we're done, because I mean it is your system ultimately, and that's that. So we know that they're going to call us when they have the next big project or whatever, but we don't want to lock them into a situation where every time they have to retrain the model or add a little, add some tags to it or something. We don't want them to have to be able to force to call us for that kind of thing.
Sure. So as it becomes more embedded into these workforces, as you're handing off the capabilities and the tools to do it, what new skills should companies be proactively, teaching their employees and getting people to a comfort level with this type of technology? And how can they best approach the training for those things? Because I know we've had a number of trainings in our organization on AI. We had a workshop just yesterday trying to, workshop and get some new ideas, some fresh ideas that aren't just, "Okay, what's your Chat GPT prompt?" Um, I mean, that's the one I use the most, but, how do we train this next generation of workers to function with the AI and not fear it?
Yeah. So there's a couple different answers there, because it really does depend on what your role is in the organization. So if you're somebody who actually feasibly, you're an analyst or an engineer, and you feasibly would be maybe interfacing to these models, or maybe even building these models, you're going to need some kind of data science background. Now, the good news is that there are free resources, there are inexpensive resources available. So there's lots of ways to get some of that data science background. I will say though that that doesn't seem to be as much of a problem for our customers. Where they're seeing the bigger problem is in the loss of expertise. So we are seeing, some people are calling it a silver tsunami, but we are seeing a loss of primarily baby boomers uh, post COVID who are leaving the manufacturing workforce. And what we're not seeing is a corresponding increase in younger folks entering the manufacturing workforce. So just to give you some stats, this came from LNS research. In 2019, the average tenure in the this is for US. The average tenure for the manufacturing workforce, average years at a company was 20 years. The average tenure, so that was 2019. In 2023, that average tenure fell to 3 years. Uh,
Whoa.
yeah, the average time in position fell from 7 years to 9 months in 2023, in just 4 years. It's a significant issue that we're seeing. It is the number one issue that customers bring up when we sit down with them, nowadays. It's a continuing issue. And so, there's 2 aspects of that then that we typically talk about. One of those things is how can we build AI systems that can augment the capabilities of a novice person, someone who hasn't been at the place very long. They also have very high turnover in these positions. So oftentimes you're talking about operators on the line. You had a 10, 15-year person, and the person replacing them maybe it has 6 months to a year in that position. Because of the high turnover, they're constantly starting over again. So how can we build AI systems that'll supplement the capabilities of these novice operators, so that we're not just running these lines suboptimally forever. Uh, and the other aspect of it is capturing that expertise from their subject matter experts before they leave. So I was just at a conference. I was speaking at a conference this week, and that was one of the key things they said. Somebody raised their hand and said, we've got some of those people that you're talking about that have been here for 15, 20 years, but they are on their way out. I mean, within the next couple
Mhm.
years, they're planning on
Yeah.
retiring. What can we do to capture that expertise in AI? And the good news is that there are mechanisms to do that, but the time to do that is now, before you lose that expertise out the door.
Yeah, that really has to be a proactive program to get that information while there's still the opportunity to do so. And it's great that there are AI tools to do that as well. But one of the things you were talking about earlier was, driving the efficiency and the productivity within that manufacturing facility. How can they also leverage that AI to advance, like, sustainability goals or something like energy management or waste reduction? There are a lot of other things besides just, like you said, the manufacturing process itself, not that, uh excited about changing the way they do it. They're 5 to 7 years behind. So there are other ways that they can use this technology to improve operations that isn't just the manufacturing process, but more about the facility itself and the processes of or I guess the byproducts of the processes. There's so much involved in manufacturing, and AI is going to touch all of it.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's actually it's so interesting to kind of generationally, to see because especially when you talk to millennials, when you talk to Gen Zs, sustainability is top of mind for them, and many of
Mhm.
them are now in leadership positions at these companies, and so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
good. Like, so we wanna be cognizant of sustainability. Um, there's kinda 2 aspects there. One is that we need to start to define AI projects as sustainability projects because you mentioned a whole bunch of things, and every single one of those things, if I'm increasing the efficiency of the line, I am reducing energy, I am increasing throughput, which means that I'm reducing waste. All of those things, I mean, the amount of waste in manufacturing is mind-boggling when you see how much gets thrown out, how much
Mhm.
scrap gets thrown out, um, and then the amount of energy that's used to run these facilities. So if I'm doing an AI project and I'm squeezing, a single or double-digit percentage improvements out of those lines, I am inevitably reducing the amount of energy. We did an AI project for a glass manufacturer, and it's so funny too because depending on who you talk to at the company, you tend to get a different answer. So we did a glass project and we were building an AI optimizer to more efficiently cut glass. Think like window panes out of a big sheet of glass. Obviously, everything else that's not window is scrap. It gets broken down and it gets remelted. Now, we were talking to a couple of the operators, and they go, "Well, we don't have scrap because all of that gets remelted, right? So effectively, our scrap level is zero." Then we later on in the day, you have a meeting with one of the finance people, and they're like, "No, all of that is scrap. We track all of that. Even if they don't know, we track all of that because all of that, even the melting down, you think about all of the energy that went into
Mhm.
producing that pane of glass
The
first,
first time.
the first time. Now you're going to break it down, you're going to smash it, and you're going to remelt it and pour all of that energy and raw material back into it, all the labor that it took. That absolutely so all of that is wasted energy. So we were made able to make massive their optimization engine that they were using to lay out these glass panes was very suboptimal. We were able to squeeze so many more panes of glass out of these sheets of glass and reduce their scrap by double digit percentage. That's a huge impact on energy reduction. Was that classified as a sustainability project by corporate? It was not. It should have been. So that's what I'm saying. We need to start defining these AI projects as sustainability projects. But the other aspect of it is that I think is in some ways even more important when we look at sustainability goals is many of these companies have very aggressive sustainability goals. Great. We want to be carbon neutral by X year. Fine. Here's the problem with that is there is no other technology other than AI that is like in the wings waiting to reduce their
Yes.
greenhouse impact or their carbon. Like there isn't any other technologies other than AI. So if you want to hit these aggressive state sustainability goals, which again I encourage, that's great, then you're going to need to start to look seriously at adopting AI and adopting AI as aggressively as you're trying to hit these goals because there isn't any other technology. Like we would have already known about it. It would be implemented already if there was some technology that was going to give you double digit percentage decreases in natural gas utilization or in, coal utilization. Like only AI can get you there. So
Unless you're horribly inefficient to begin with. But let's hope that everyone is starting from at least a place of we're trying our best.
well, and so you know what's really interesting? You say that because one of the questions I get is well, so I RoviSys services 14 different industries. So everything from oil and gas to life science to consumer packaged goods, food and beverage, you name it. One of the questions I get is what industries have adopted AI first? And it's not what you would think. The industries that are adopting AI first, in a big way, turns out they're the commodity industries. Glass. I've got more steel projects, AI projects going in steel than you would imagine. And to your point, those are processes that have been around for like 100 years and haven't changed that much, right? These are well understood, well optimized processes, and they are the one, but it's also very tight margins, it's commodity pricing. So they are the ones that know if they can squeeze a couple more percentages out of their existing equipment, that can be the edge over their competitors. The industries that have not adopted it widely is life science. I think because of the risk aversion, plus they always have to worry about FDA validation and things like that. So there's a lot more risk there, and so they have not adopted it as much as you would think, and as quickly as you would think.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, when we're talking about some of these adoptions and readiness to adopt, you mentioned that, these commodities companies, these raw materials companies, they're ready. They're chomping at the bit. They're interested. One of I mean, that's a critical component is being ready. You're not gonna be able to make a change if your team, if your organization isn't ready for it. What are some of the common pitfalls that manufacturers encounter regarding, like, data quality? I know that's a huge one for us when we're working with our clients is the quality of the data that they're able to provide. I'm sure as an integrator, you also face that, uh, where they think they have good data, and then they hand it to you, and you're like, "Wait, not it's okay." Uh, so the data quality, things like their infrastructure, like what do they have to be able to work with once they've got some information? Um, and what kind of practical steps could companies who are interested start making in order to increase their maturity and be ready for those next AI projects?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls and tips and tricks and things like that we could talk about. But let me boil down because you already mentioned a couple. Let me add to that list. So, um, I would say the number one thing is data infrastructure, at the plant floor level. So this is capturing the data as it happens, in real time. For those of you who may not be as familiar, your listeners, with manufacturing, we use these what are called time series databases. We call them historians, and we capture that process data, the very fast moving data. We capture it in real time and we store it in these optimized databases that are made to store this type of data. Um, we want to get more historians in. We want to get more data capture as close to the sources of data as possible. So that's step one. Step two then is that we want to consolidate that data into the cloud. So we want to marry that data, both the process data, but then we want to marry it to the transactional and relational data that's both on the plant floor, but also might exist in IT systems like ERP systems. We need to marry a really important factor that a lot of people underestimate is marrying up that quality data, right? So it's not enough to know how the thing was made if you were making junk the whole time. So you need to know what was the final quality of that batch. There's some tricks that we can do to marry that data together so that you can get a single data set, but ultimately, and even the data quality things you were talking about, those are important, but a lot of times we do real data science too. So the data science algorithms a lot of times can tell you when you're having data quality issues, so you can go back and kind of fix those after the fact. But ultimately, we're trying to build consolidated, clean, concise, consolidated data sets that we can then leverage to build ML models. But the final step or the final tip here, I would say around readiness is to start with use cases and work backwards to the technology and the data that's required. Most customers get that backwards, and I understand because you got a lot of vendors in the space that are hammering on them technology, technology. So they get technology into their head, and then they try to work backwards to the use case. You really want to start with use cases, figure out where the value is, and then work backwards to what's the data I'm going to need to make that a reality, and what is the technology. There's no limit to the amount of money and time you could spend on data and technology. The limit is what value you can get out of it, and that's what the use cases are gonna tell you.
Alright, so speaking of value and return on investment, that's critical, obviously, all the time, but what other measures of success are there with AI? And, is there something else they should be looking at to measure success of a project?
100%. And I'm so glad you asked that because I get into these meetings where customers get so laser focused on the dollar ROI, and it's like, yes, okay, I understand that, and we can get there with AI projects. We can pick the right projects that have the dollar ROI. But there are so many other things. The first one I would say is quality. I'd say three. The first one is quality of life for those folks who actually work in the plant. So if we can make their life better, safer, if we can put them in positions where they're adding more value to the organization, if we can just make their life less repetitive and their job, and make them excited to come to work, like those are all things. I mean, those aren't going to be captured in dollars, but those are the quality of life things that AI can bring. I would say the second one is agility to face shifting regulations, agility to handle disruptions in supply chain, agility to respond to customer demands. I've got a lot of customers that say, 5, 10 years ago, we were the company that like 80% of our output was one product, one SKU. We just kind of burn and churn on this one thing. And now suddenly we've got this huge mix of products we've got to service because that's where the market has gone. It's more custom, it's more focused. So that ability to handle those things and face those types of changes more quickly. And the final one, and the one that I don't think manufacturers think enough about, is the ability to attract a workforce who's grown up with technology. So these younger generation, my kids were born with an iPad in their hand, good, bad, or indifferent. Like they just were like they've been using an iPad since they could, crawl and whatever. So they are used to that, and that's what they're looking for in their job that they're going to spend 8+ hours a day at. So manufacturers need to spend more time thinking about that ability to attract a workforce. It's one of those things that Silicon Valley startups, those tech companies, they think a lot about how do I attract and keep a good workforce. And manufacturers, so an AI project even maybe the dollar amount ROI, is close, but maybe not as compelling. But boy, if I'm a company that looks like I invest in AI and I can use that as a talking point and I can get out to career fairs and say, "Hey, we've got 5 AI projects going right now." That's a company that's going to attract those workers again that are in high demand because they don't have enough of these people. So
Absolutely, because it goes right back to your first point that we don't have the longevity in these positions anymore, and good, bad, or otherwise, we have to assume that that's because of some sort of churn, and if that's the case, then you don't only need to attract the right people, you need to keep the right people, and so if that's going to elevate their status in the eyes of today's workforce, that's huge. And that's not necessarily something you can measure with a number. I'm sure there's a number somewhere, a metric, a KPI that they're gonna come up with. They're gonna say that this is our, net quality score or whatever for recruiting or for, being a techie company. There's lots of awards. There's lots of distinctions that they can utilize to show that, but it's not a dollar amount that's gonna go on their annual report. So looking towards that next decade, the next 5 to 10 years, how do you see it evolving in manufacturing? Is there a trend or a particular technology within the AI scope that manufacturers should be watching out for to stay ahead?
100%. So obviously, generative AI. So for your listeners, generative AI is an umbrella term that includes ChatGPT, all the large language models or LLMs, as well as the image and video generation. Um, sure, generative AI, we understand the impact it's having, and it's new and it's exciting. And again, when most people say AI, they
That's what they
they
think
mean
of.
generative AI, right? But there are other types of AI, and one in
Yes,
particular that I'd like to highlight briefly is what's called autonomous AI. And autonomous AI is AI that's built on now it's almost a decade old, a ML algorithm called deep reinforcement learning. And what makes autonomous AI unique is its ability it's able to build long-term strategy. So it's able to make human-like decisions. They started out by using it to play games. It beat all of our best grandmasters at the game of Go, at the game of chess, StarCraft. But then, it's matured a lot since then, and so we're using it. I've got customers, real customers that are running on the plant floor right now they're using it in production. And again, it's the perfect technology because it can learn like a human can. It's the perfect technology to augment the capability of younger employees, newer employees. And through a process that we use called machine teaching, we're actually able to capture that expertise from those subject matter experts and build it into the autonomous AI so that it uses that as its basis. And then when we train it, it learns and gets to an expert level at whatever part of the process we're pointing it at. So I think a lot of manufacturers, when I talk to them, they tend to call me in because they want to talk AI and they think we're going to talk about generative AI. And immediately I pivot and I talk about autonomous AI because the reality of it is that the types of problems that we're solving on the plant floor tend to be more operational problems. And that's what autonomous AI is good at addressing. Generative AI is great at knowledge type problems, but those are kind of in a different part of the manufacturing facility. We need to solve operational problems. So I would encourage for those manufacturers who maybe haven't looked into autonomous AI, please do look into that. It is, we feel like an inflection point. We do feel like autonomous AI and the adoption of it is going to be one of those things that's going to make a sea change, a big step change in how our manufacturers work. So we're very bullish on it. And then, of course, generative AI. I mean, there's no question that it's going to have a huge impact, and we should continue. My customers should continue to look into generative AI and keep it on their radar. But there's some very big limitations with generative AI. It cannot reason. In fact, there was a study that came out from Apple late last year that finally proved once and for all that generative AI is not capable of reasoning. It will never be. Autonomous AI can reason. It can understand causal connections, but generative AI won't be able to. And the other thing is hallucinations, which they're working to try to minimize. But we just saw on Saturday, the Chicago Sun-Times ran an article. I don't know if you saw it, with the summer reading list for 2025, and over half of the books on that list don't exist
Don't exist.
because the author had used AI to generate the thing, and no one from editors on down, no one had bothered to double check that these were actual books. So hallucinations, I mean, and that's, it's funny when it does those types of things in those kinds of contexts, or it generates crazy marketing blurbs. But on the plant floor, I mean, you could kill somebody. So it's just not appropriate to use generative AI yet on the plant floor. But keep an eye on it. I mean, it's going to get there, but it's still a relatively new technology.
All right. So it's clear that this conversation is just beginning, and we look forward to seeing how these strategies continue to evolve in the manufacturing space. Thanks so much, Bryan, for joining us and sharing your insight today.
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen.
To our listeners, if you found today's episode valuable, be sure to follow Speaking of Supply Chain wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone who's shaping the future of operations. Until next time, keep innovating and keep automating.